Shanghai GDG is a very interesting developer community.
I'm glad somebody has asked this question.
This is where the magic happens.
This is primarily a question and answer show. So if any of you out there would like to ask questions.
Hello everyone, and welcome to our first Make the Web Fast episode. My name is Ilya Grigorik. I'm a developer advocate with the creatively titled Make the Web Fast team. And with me?
My name is Justin Cutroni. I'm the analytics advocate, slightly different than a developer advocate, and I work on the Google Analytics team.
Awesome. So, Justin, I'm really excited about our episode today, because I think it covers two topics that are the most near and dear to my heart, which is web performance and web analytics. And I don't say this just because I think that Google Analytics is awesome, which it is, but also because anytime you talk about the web optimization field or any sort of optimization, you really have to have good tools because you have to measure and you have to understand and quantify what it is that you're trying to do. Otherwise, you're just working in the dark.
Yeah, and I'm really excited because we're going to hopefully tell people how to make their businesses better and their websites better.
Right, and I guess that's the other component, right? Like us developers love to optimize our sites to go faster and faster, but at a certain point you have to ask the question of how does it relate to the business as well?
Dollars and cents.
Dollars and cents, right. So, hopefully you'll keep us honest.
We'll try.
Yeah. So also I think it's a very good episode to start or kick off our series with because as I mentioned, you really need to have good tools. And Google Analytics gives you a lot of power, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So there are three broad topics that I want to make sure that we cover today. The first one is just what are the tools, what do we mean by web performance optimization, and what are the metrics that we need to track. The second one is real user measurement, which is perhaps a very obvious concept to a lot of people in the analytics space, but perhaps not so obvious to people, to developers, just because we haven't had access to a lot of this data in the past. And then the last one is, of course, to tie it all together with Google Analytics.
Yep, and I'll cover that part. We'll talk about the business and how all of these great technical things that Ilya is going to tell you about in terms of speed and performance optimization can be measured in terms of dollars and cents, literally, for your business.
Right. Okay, so with that, we do have some slides that we're going to go through. Just a little bit of housekeeping. You can find both Justin and myself on Google+, so you can ask us questions during the event or after the event, and we'll make sure to answer your questions. And also, throughout the slide deck, you'll see the Goog.gl link at the bottom. You can head there, and there's a moderator, Google moderator page there, so you can actually submit your questions, and we'll do some questions at the end. We may not get to all of them, but we'll try our best. Yeah. All right. So let's get right into it. Lots of stuff to cover. So, I'll start with the most obvious thing that I think needs to be put up front, which is just your typical development cycle, right? So, as a web designer, website owner, you usually go through three typical steps, right? You write code or you optimize your page. You test it, hopefully. Hopefully you have things like unit tests, integration tests to make sure that your site is not broken given the updates. You may even have performance or regression tests, right? So perhaps a new feature that you have introduced, is it causing some other behaviors that may slow down your site? That's a good thing to catch. Visual inspection and Q&A. So I think a lot of people today depend on Q&A just in terms of does my site work? Does it work fast enough? But here's the trick, at least in my experience. Then I deploy my code, and maybe it just says more about my development skills than anything else. But whenever I deploy my code, then I get a bunch of phone calls or emails and stuff like this, which just says that's cool that it works for you, but it doesn't work for me. Or for some reason, it just feels slower, which is even worse because when something is broken, you can at least say what is broken. When something is just slow, it's like, well, there's a million things that could have gone wrong, right? And the one thing that I've learned over time is my computer and my device is completely different from my customer's device. This may seem completely obvious, but I think it's worth stating. And there's a huge number of factors that go into this. So first of all, I may be testing my new site on a Chromebook or my desktop computer, and you're trying to access the site on your mobile phone. Right? Two completely different classes of devices, different CPU power, amount of memory, even the network. Right? So loading a bunch of images on my desktop computer may not be a big deal, but loading the same images on a mobile connection may actually be pretty painful. So the one thing that I've learned, and I think the web optimization community at large is working on today, is making sure that we measure real performance from, as in from real users when they interact with your real site on real network conditions. Right? That's a lot of reals in there. Keeping it real. Because of that, we invented RUM, except not this kind of RUM, and we didn't really invent it because all it stands for is real user measurement, right? And this is what I mean by this may seem completely obvious to somebody in the analytics space because it's like, well, of course, how else do you get the data? You gather it from the real users, right? But in the context of web performance or any sort of performance optimization, historically we relied on synthetic testing, right? So I would do a benchmark on my own computer or set up a test that will perhaps even hit my website from different geographic locations in the world. But the key point there is it's not based on real user behavior or even real user browsers and all these things. That type of data has been actually very hard to gather because we haven't had the tools to actually get the performance data from our browser. Like how long did it take to connect to the server and all of these things. So that's what real user measurement is all about. And you guys will find this acronym RUM in a lot of places as you get kind of deeper into the web performance field. So the good news is there's been a lot of work and effort put together by the W3C Web Performance Working Group. So the group started about 2 years ago, and they've been working on a number of different new specifications and APIs to enable better tools and just better browser performance. And specifically, they came up with this really scary looking diagram here, which is the W3C navigation spec. Now, there's a lot of labels in here, and the labels don't really matter for the purposes of our discussion. What is important, though, is the 3 colors that we have in here. The first one is the green one, which is the network. And then you have the server and the browser. And what this tells you is, for any page that you load on the browser, there are 3 broad components that come into play. First of all, there's the network, which is how are you accessing the page. So me accessing the page on my mobile phone versus my desktop computer are 2 entirely different experiences. And a lot of that is due to different network conditions, right? Then there's the server. So the server can be really fast or it can be kind of slow, right? Never happened to me. And then the last one is the browser, which is once the server sends all of this data and it's delivered over the network, the browser actually needs to interpret all of this data and kind of lay it out on the screen. And increasingly, we're putting more and more JavaScript into our pages to make it more interactive. So that stuff also takes time. So really, all of these black labels in here, what they tell you is for each of these labels, the browser actually captures a timestamp when the page is rendered. And it allows us to introspect into this entire workflow for any page and see how long each step took, right? So this is really awesome because up until maybe a year ago, we didn't even have this capability. The only thing we could measure at best is some timing in the browser, but then we didn't see or didn't have any visibility into the network. So the cool thing is if you're using Chrome, Firefox, or IE, you can actually open your developer tools and type in your console performance.timing, and you'll get this object back. And some of these labels here, actually all of them, correspond to the labels that we saw in the previous diagram, right? And the W3C guys are serious about web performance because they actually went for the microsecond granularity, not even milliseconds. Forget milliseconds, we're optimizing at microsecond level here. And so you can open this console on any web page that you're browsing currently and type this in, and these are the stats for your connection, for your browser, right? This is not some generic number that's coming from the server itself, right? So that's the big change. Up until very recently, we just didn't have access to this data. And when I say we, as in web developers, right? So the good news is that navigation timing is now supported in more than half of all the browsers, so about 64%. Chrome, Firefox, IE, We have support for, we're growing support for mobile browsers as well. So we have Android browsers, Chrome and Firefox. The one in mission right now is the Safari browsers. So I think they're catching up at this point. But the point is, it's not 100% deployed yet, but it's getting there. So that's the good news. And the reason I think this is important and why RUM, or real user measurement, is important is it's great to read the latest in terms of top 10 things you should do to optimize your site, or the top 10 performance improvements. But frankly, your site is different, your audience may be different, and your goals may be different, right? It may not actually matter to you. So what these metrics allow you to do is actually measure all of those things with respect to your goals, right? Like, is it even worth that I spend half a day micro-optimizing this specific thing? Because maybe if it doesn't make a bottom line impact on my business, right, maybe I should work on my marketing instead.
Yeah, you have to take it a grain of salt, right? You need to be able to compare the benefit of every optimization.
Exactly.
Yep.
Right. So that's the key aspect here. So how do we collect navigation timing data? Remember that this data is available in the browser, so during each session, and that's where Google Analytics comes in.
Yep.
And the cool thing about this is there's just 10 easy steps to get navigation timing working with GA. The first step is you log into your existing Google Analytics account, and the second is you navigate to the site speed overview. And actually, at that point, you're done. So I'm just using binary notation here.
You pulled the super nerd trick, didn't you?
Yes.
You went there.
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought it was funny when I was making the slides.
Well, you were going to bring up a great point. Really, the nice thing is about having that specification is because all that data is already in the browser, Google Analytics can collect it automatically, right?
Yep.
So there's already reports built. You don't need to do anything special other than use your Google Analytics account and just log in. You're going to have this data.
Yeah, this is why I love talking about this stuff, because
it's just there.
I always start the conversation with here's all the things you need to do to enable navigation timing or gather this data. And oh, by the way, you already have it.
Yep.
Right? So after you finish listening to this webcast, you can turn around to your coworker and be like, hey, I just set up.
Actually, you could just do it right now. You can listen to us, and you could be in Google Analytics and another monitor on another screen.
Yeah.
That would be even cooler.
Yeah. So Google Analytics automatically collects all of this data for you. You don't have to do anything. There's one caveat, and we'll get back to it in a second. But let's go and do an actual demo.
Let's look at some data.
So let me just switch to our tab over here. Okay, all right. So this is my own personal account. This is data for my own blog. And what you see here is I've just went into content, site speed, and overview, right? So I'm just looking at my regular profile. And we're looking at about, the last 30 days of data, July 14 to today. So you can see that over the last 30 days, I've had 50,000 page views, right? And this graph right here shows you the average page loading time. So this is gathered through navigation timing. And average page loading time is the time when the spinner stops on your browser. Right? There's many
pretty detailed.
Yeah, there's many different ways. I think it's important to define when the page is loaded. You don't have to wait for the spinner to stop, because oftentimes the content's already visible and you can start interacting with it. But that's what this specific metric tells you.
And this is a great point to stop for a second and say that we have a lot of different metrics in here that are collected from the browser. They match up perfectly with that diagram that Ilya provided about the various points from server to network to browser. And so if you are looking for a definition, we have a help center for Google Analytics that defines what all of our metrics are, so that you can get detailed information about, what does this metric mean in terms of time measurement in my browser versus time measurement at the server level versus time measurement about some network attribute.
Yeah, and it's very useful to then go back to that kind of scary-looking diagram and just see where or at which point each one of these labels corresponds to, because that really helps you build a visual model of where is my problem, if you will, where's the performance bottleneck. So on the overview page, you just get a quick summary of the key metrics, things like the domain lookup time or the DNS time that it took to resolve your site. So perhaps your DNS provider is not very good, as in it's slow, right? So that would show up here, and that's a very good sign that you may want to look into a different provider. Server response time. So this is interesting because I think this comes as news to a lot of people. It's like Google Analytics can measure my server response time. I thought I had to look at my logs for that. It's like, well, not anymore, because we have this data.
It's in the
which
browser.
is great. And we also have other metrics. So this is the high-level overview. We can also go in and drill into the page timings. So in here, because Google Analytics collects this data on per page level, you actually get all of this data in any granularity that you want, right? So we were just looking at your global stats for the last 30 days. You can also drill into any specific page here. So for example, this latency post that I published a few weeks back, right? It had 13,000 page views, and you can see that on average it took about 6 seconds to load this page. Pretty slow.
And so for all of you folks that are not familiar with analytics, we just call this drilling down segmentation, right? And so what we're doing is we're taking that top level number and we're kind of going into it to look at one smaller piece and understand how that smaller piece is performing. And that's a critical thing in analytics, because making these incremental changes ultimately adds to a bigger benefit to your website.
Right, exactly. So in here, we can also drill in. So we're looking at page views, average page load time, but what about the other metrics, right? So you can go into the technical drill down here.
You want technical? We've got technical.
Yeah, we've got technical, that's for sure. And you see just for this specific page, averages for loading time, redirection time, lookup times, 50 different times. And then you can graph or you can compare these metrics against any other metric that you have in Google Analytics, which is really cool. So, we're looking at all pages versus any specific page. So that's kind of one first tip. Now, the second one is, let's go into performance here. So averages are very good and useful, but they can be misleading.
Absolutely.
Especially when you talk about web performance. Because what you find is you'll get skewed distributions, right? You have kind of peaks and valleys. And when you just compute an average of it, it may completely hide the entire story.
It's like the average net worth of me and Bill Gates is, Bill kind of skews that average higher than,
right.
Or I bring it down lower, whichever way you want to look at it. But the outliers skew things.
Exactly. So the histograms allow you to actually see the underlying distribution of the data. So you can see here we're looking at the page loading time. And within the page loading time, we have the different buckets. So 33% of all the users loaded the page in sub 1 second, right? And we can actually expand this bucket even further and look as to what the breakdown is here, right? 43% loaded the page within 1 to 3 seconds. So this is very useful information. And you can do this sort of drill down for any specific metric in here. And I'll show you guys a side-by-side comparison of one specific case, which I think is really important. So let me go back to this next tab. So what you're looking at here is my site, and the data's from January 1st to January 31st. Actually went back in time. And the reason I'm showing you this is it just so happens that on December 31st, that's what I do, I guess, on my holidays, I completely migrated my site to a different hosting provider. I completely rewrote how the data is served and everything, right? I guess that's my holiday. And I know that I made that cutoff on December 31st. So what I want to show you here is this is the data after I migrated. Now let's select this, and I'll do compare to the past. So I want to compare January to December. Yep. Did all of this work that I do, I guess, on December 31st, amount to much or not? So I'll compare this, and now we have two lines here. It may not be immediately obvious what the difference is, but now look at the metrics, right? My average page loading time went down by 25%. My server response time went by 76%.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so this is a huge improvement, right? And I can actually show you the data and quantify it, and everything's green. So to me, this is huge success.
And the measurement was easy, right? What did you have to do to?
I didn't have to do anything.
You didn't have to do anything. Yep, that's the best part.
Yeah, that's the best part, exactly. So let me just go back here. So as I was exploring these reports, frankly, I didn't even realize that Google Analytics was collecting this data at first, right? And then I found these things and wow, this is awesome. But the light bulb moment for me was not when I was just browsing through these reports, but when I realized that I have all of the power of Google Analytics.
Yep, absolutely.
Right? So as an example, we can look at the map overlay here. And what this shows you is for every visitor that comes to my site, Google Analytics collects geo information, right? And we can then cross-reference that. So it may be a little bit hard to see, but the colors on the map here they correspond to the amount of time that it took to load the page. So there's a couple of countries in here, specifically Iraq and Syria, where on average the pages take 105 seconds to load.
That's a long time.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever waited 105 seconds for a page to load. So what this tells me is most likely there's some asset on my site or some JavaScript resource that is probably even just blocked. And because of that, the user gets a blank page, and then that thing times out, and then they get the page, which is a terrible experience.
Very bad.
Right? So that's something for me to look into. But now let's go back here. You're looking at the, let's see, page use here, right, which is sort of what I want. Let me go back to overview. Yeah, so we have average page load time.
Yep.
Now, advanced segments is like, oh my God, moment for me.
Yeah, if you've never used analytics, advanced segments is one of the most powerful features of this tool, where you can basically segment the data in real time, right? And segmentation is similar to filtering, but you could say, show me all mobile traffic, and Google Analytics will, in real time, filter your data for you. Or show me all my mobile traffic coming from Syria, or show me all my mobile traffic coming from North America. So you can pretty much drill into the data almost an infinite number of ways in order to analyze the performance of certain segments of your traffic, which is really valuable here, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so the key point here is you don't need to know these things up front. Right? You can just apply this stuff. So for example, I want to compare the average page loading time between, let's say, North and South America versus Asia.
Yep.
Right? So I've already created a custom segment called Americas, which stands for the North and South. Now, what I want is Asia as well, right? So to do that, I'll create a new custom segment, and I'll do a continent containing Asia. Whoops. And I'll need to name it, and I'll save. Okay, so we've created the segment, and I'll just compare it to this guy. Apply. And look at that.
Yep.
There's a huge difference. Turns out there's a huge difference between users coming from Asia and users coming from North or South America.
Absolutely.
And you know what? That makes sense because my servers happens to be located about 200 miles from where we're sitting here in California. So it makes sense that users in North America get a faster experience.
Yeah. And what's interesting is, remember, all of these metrics tell you a different part of the story in terms of a page loading in someone's browser. Part of the story is what's happening at the network level, part of the story is what's happening at the server level, and part of the story is what's happening in the browser level. So Ilya, you may have a really long time for the page to load, but your server response might be fast, or the DNS
Exactly.
lookup might be fast. So that gives you tips into what the optimization might be. Like you mentioned before, it might be, I need to get a better DNS provider so the lookup happens faster.
Yep.
Or if it's, your page is really crappy and it takes a lot of time to render in the browser, that's something that you can go ahead and work on.
You can do a ton of forensics, right? So for example, here you have this giant spike, and a natural question would be, well, why did it take 16 seconds?
Okay.
So maybe I can create a new segment to segment mobile versus desktop in Asia, and kind of just drill in and find out the root cause.
Mm-hmm. More segmentation.
Yep, it's what it's all about. So we already talked about this.
Yeah, we had some.
Yep. Just a quick note. So this is a side-by-side comparison between December and January. This is what I meant by averages can lie.
Yep.
Right? You have two completely different kind of bimodal distributions here. So make sure to pay attention to these things.
All right, so let's this has been awesome. And you guys, if you don't know Ilya is like performance super nerd. He loves this stuff, and he's really, he makes it contagious. I'm actually doing a whole bunch of speed optimization on my own website now. But in my work in analytics, I talk to a lot of business people, a lot of marketers, a lot of advertisers who are, happy to talk to Ilya and hear about this amazing speed stuff, but they're like, yeah, I need to make some money. And so the best part about analytics is it's all about your business, right? And Google Analytics, we really stress to people that you have to measure what's important to your business. What is the desired outcome that you have? Whether it's on your desktop website or your mobile website or even your app, we want you to think about what am I trying to do? What is the core business objective of my site, my mobile site, or my app? And when you boil down the entire internet, there's really only 5 types of business models. I might be trying to sell a product, generate some type of lead. I might be a publisher trying to generate revenue from ads. I might be trying to provide support to a group, or I might be out there trying to build my brand. And so with Google Analytics, we can track all of those different types of objectives, and we use a feature called goals. The really, really important thing is that you take the time to sit down and define what is your objective and what are your goals, and make sure you configure Google Analytics in order to track those things. Because if you don't, you're really just tracking a whole bunch of data that, while is useful, it doesn't help you understand the impact to your business. So we've got a whole bunch of videos on the Google Analytics YouTube channel about how to set up goals in your account. And what I want to do here is tell you a little bit about how you can configure Google Analytics to take the awesome speed data that Ilya showed you and compare it to some of the conversion data and revenue data that you can collect with Google Analytics. And why are we doing this? Well, again, you talk to the speed guys, and their objective is they want to make the web fast. And there's a good reason to do that, because there's been a lot of studies that show the slower your website is, the lower your conversion rate's going to be, the more trouble your website visitors are going to have in reaching their objective or your business objective, whether that's buying a product or submitting a lead form. And so there's been a number of studies by companies like Gomez and Akamai and Tagman that have shown a drop in conversion rate the longer it takes for pages to render on your site. And again, it's not just render. You have to kind of think of that whole process of the network, the server, and the browser generating that page for the visitor. So there is financial proof here, conversion proof, that if you speed things up, you're going to do better. You're going to create a better experience for your website visitors, and ultimately that's going to lead to an increase in business for you. So how might we do some of these things? Well, the reports that we looked at before in Google Analytics about speed are spot on, right? They tell you lots of things about all of the different speed metrics. The one thing that they're missing is they don't have a lot of data about the conversions or the revenue that's in analytics. And so when Ilya and I were talking about doing this webcast, we talked about some reports and some ways that we could customize Google Analytics in order to generate that data so you can see it in one interface. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over to Google Analytics and walk you guys through some customization that's not too advanced. You can totally do this, but we want to show you guys how to make some custom reports that have all this great data. Let's see, that's not it. That's not it. That's it. Third click. Awesome. Okay. So if you've never used Google Analytics before, we have a lot of different ways that you can customize the product. The advanced custom segments, that's one way that you can slice and dice your data. And one of my favorites is the custom reports. And the reason why I love custom reports so much is that I can get exactly the data I want in one screen, and I can build in all sorts of metrics that help me understand whatever it is I'm trying to analyze. And so this is an account I have here, and I have a whole bunch of different custom reports. You can see there's many, many different kinds. And you can create your own custom reports by just clicking on this new custom report button. And we'll just walk through a few basics of this. I'm going to give my report a name. Maybe it's my awesome speed report. And within my report, I have 2 types of information. I have metrics and I have dimensions. And metrics are just numbers, right? Mm-hmm. So when we were looking at some of the reports previously, we were looking at metrics like DNS response time, page rendering time, page load time. Yep. And so if you can literally start to type in here, if I'm, page load time, and that metric's going to pop up, right? So I can put that into my report. And so we have all of those great speed metrics we talked about. I encourage you to play with this. But we also have all those business metrics that I really like. So I could type in something like revenue, which is amazing, right? Because that tells me how much money I'm making. And I have conversion rate as well, right? So I'm going to just type in goal number 7 that I have configured here.
And maybe just one quick note, right? So revenue is like the ultimate metric, ultimately, right?
Absolutely.
But, thank you. But having said that, for sites that may not have a direct conversion to revenue, so for example, my own site is a blog, right? I don't have revenue from it, but I do have goals defined in my blog, which are things like, have you visited my archive page, or have you subscribed to my RSS feed? So I could also use those metrics in here, right?
Absolutely. Just because you don't sell a product, it doesn't mean you don't have goals for your website. It just means those goals are different. So like you said, if you're a blogger, I'm a blogger myself, and the objective of my blog is to connect with people. And so my goals might be around people connecting with me via social media through the blog, or people submitting contact forms. So that's why the whole process of aligning the Google Analytics data with your business is really important, and we do that through these goals. So if you don't have any goals set up, you're really missing out on the best data, right? You can measure visits and pages per visit and time and all those standard things, but you really have to distill it down as what am I trying to do with this blog? What is the value that I'm trying to get out of this?
Yep.
So we can add a lot of different metrics here to our report, and again, metrics around revenue and conversions, so no matter what the site does. And I can then add in a whole bunch of different dimensions. And dimensions are just really they're attributes of a visit, right? So they could be the page the visitor was looking at, could be the country the visitor came from. I can put almost anything in here, right? So let's just put in country. And so what will happen is Google Analytics will build out this report, and it'll show me all of my countries and then the metrics for those countries, right? So if I click Save.
And this is all done live.
Yeah, exactly, live, right? So here, now we have a list of countries, and we have the metrics that we're talking about. Average page load time, revenue, and conversion rate. Now I'm going to skip to a similar report here that's just maybe a little bit more advanced because I want to show you guys a few things. So I've got countries listed here in one column, and I've got a whole bunch of our different performance metrics like load time, domain lookup time, redirect time, and I've got a couple of conversions here. I've got revenue. The revenue is all zeros because I wanted to put revenue in there just to show you could, but I don't have any revenue configured on my blog. But I have this goal of people actually reading articles. And so what I can start to do is start to look and see, like, is there any relationship between some of these speed metrics, like domain lookup time or redirect time, and the conversion rate that's happening. What I think is really interesting about building this report out is something we mentioned before, where you have metrics for different parts of the process, right? So whether it's server, network, or browser-based. And certain types of things are dependent on like geolocation, or they might be dependent on the piece of content. So this report has country and territory. And so for those things, I would be thinking like, oh, network and server types of configuration and metrics, because they're distant, right? If you said you've only got one server here in California, so is there a problem with the Philippines or Indonesia or someplace that's far away?
So a very concrete conclusion would have been if I was, let's say, selling something, and I could show that in Asia I'm getting lower conversions and it corresponds to higher response times, well, maybe I get another server in Asia. Or I use a CDN provider or something similar. Yeah,
absolutely. And so that's the thing I think is great about this report. Now, if you're like me, like I'm the analytics guy, I have to look at a lot of data. Sometimes I can get lazy, and I want new and different ways to look at these things. And so I want to show you a really great tip in Google Analytics. If you'll notice here, we have a series of buttons on the top right part of our table. And I can change the view of my data into something called the performance view. And this allows me to literally, like visually in green and red, see what's good or bad. So I can say, all right, I want to look at the average domain lookup here. And I can see that time for these different countries. And I'm going to switch this over to my conversion rate. Now, this is kind of hard. Red means something's really bad, and green means something's okay. So now my analysis is basically good, bad, bad, good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, bad. Done. Now I can go to my speed expert, Ilya here, and he can like optimize the domain lookup time for all of those different countries. And the first thing he can do is be like, dude, I don't care about Malaysia. Like, we're not doing business in Malaysia. It's not really a big deal. But I really do care about France.
We do care about Malaysia.
We do care about Malaysia. We do, in real life. But you could look at other, like Canada. Why are you so slow? Or Morocco. you can look at these other geographic locations, and this is showing you that, the conversion rate, because it's like literally it's red here, for those types of places is lower. So I've got over 100 rows of data. I can expand this out and look. But I really like this visualization. And I can change this metric here in the first column to be any of the metrics that I configured in this custom report. And again, that can be any of these speed-related metrics. So now I have a nice visual way of seeing the relationship between a speed metric and an end business result, which, I mean, to me...
I think this is an awesome bridge, right? Because for somebody who's responsible for the bottom line in the business, you can actually now connect it to speed and be like, this is why I need to optimize my site.
Totally.
And vice versa, if I'm a developer, I can look at this data and show my bottom line guy that, hey, we really need to invest into web optimization.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I'll just show you guys, this report, I've actually created this report, and this tab has geodata, but I've got other tabs. I've got other tabs that show this data segmented by the different browsers. And so on this tab, instead of having things like server-related metrics or network-related metrics, I can have browser-related metrics. And now I can look at each browser and do the same type of analysis. And I can actually add a layer of detail where for each browser, if I click on it, I can break that browser down by the pages that were displayed via that browser. Right? And so now I'm doing that, drilling down that segmentation that helps me understand, like, this page in this browser might be really, really bad. And I could switch over and, again, do my conversion or my revenue type comparison using that visualization. So this is a really handy report. We've got a little treat for you about it at the end of the presentation. But play with the custom reports. Go build out some custom reports around your speed metrics and the various dimensions that they're appropriate for, and you'll be amazed at what you find.
Awesome.
So let's go back to the presentation maybe. And
so we have just a few more quick tips. And so I think we talked about all of this.
Yeah, these were just backup slides.
Always good to have a backup.
Exactly.
Right. So yes, this is an awesome, awesome report. You can also build your own dashboard.
Yep.
Right. So unlike a custom report, this is just kind of a quick way to assemble a bunch of metrics. And so a couple of very quick tips. So by default, Google Analytics does not sample the navigation timing data from 100% of users.
Right.
It's set to 1%. Now, there is a limit as to how much data you can collect, which is 10,000 samples a day. So my tip is, and this is something that I've done on my site, is in your Google Analytics configuration code, if your site is below 10,000 visits, you can actually increase your sampling rate such that you have more data. So that's one thing you should probably do if you don't have a lot of traffic like my site. So you can set your sample rate, geez, to 100%.
A lot of S's.
Yep. Second thing that I've done for my site, you can take any of these reports, you can create a PDF report that just gets emailed to you every week. So every Monday I get an email which I just look at, which shows me if anything bad has happened.
And what's really cool is that you can create an automated email report, send a PDF format of the custom report that we just looked at that has the business data in there. And that's something that maybe I'm not going to look at every day, but I might look at that weekly or monthly depending on how big my site is.
Exactly. It's just a very easy way to keep tabs on this thing. And then the last tip is, if you're doing performance optimization, one thing that I find very, very useful is adding annotations on the graph.
Absolutely.
So it's a little bit hard to see here, but when you, if you expand the annotation bar, you can actually add your own notes in there, such that when you see that peak or valley in the graph, you can then go back and be like, oh yeah, that's when I did that crazy thing, and now everything's fast. Yeah,
annotations are a really, really important thing. The great thing about annotations are they're shared across your Google Analytics account. So if a business person like me logs in, I can see an annotation that Ilya left that said, hey, we added a new server in Malaysia, and that might be great because that might have been the date that my conversion rate started to increase. Or my
By the way, make your site fast.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he just types in optimized site.
Yeah.
So we showed you guys some customizations, and we're just going to give those to you. So these links that are here on the screen will, if you type them into your browser, they will automatically open up Google Analytics, and they'll ask you if you'd like to add them into your Google Analytics account. So there's the business impact of speed. That's the custom report that I was showing you guys. So it's got a number of metrics along with your conversion type metrics. There is a little bit of customization you'll need to do. Make sure you have goals set up in Google Analytics, and make sure that you choose your goals for that particular report. But other than that, that's all you need to do.
Yep.
And we created a site performance dashboard that has a lot of just the general metrics around how your site's performing. That's a great one if you're into speed, if you're into site performance to use every day, and you can automate the delivery of that via email, so you get it every morning. Don't even need to log into GA, which is great.
So Justin, I think just because we're so excited, we kind of went over time here. So there are some questions. I'm not sure if we're going to have much time to get into the... Oh, let me see, where are we? Here we go.
Yeah.
If we can't answer the question right now,
Yeah.
then we'll follow up on Google+, so feel free to ping us there. But I think that there's a few that we can answer quickly. So this question, I think I can take,
Great.
which is, Google APIs are really, really powerful, but JavaScript makes potentially my site slower. Should I be using it? And the answer there is, you should absolutely use the HTML5 features in a browser, because unlike trying to fill in different capabilities within JavaScript, when you have capabilities right in a browser, they will go faster. You shouldn't be scared of using JavaScript, especially if that's what makes your site tick, right? So measure these things. That's probably the most important message, or the answer there.
Yeah, maybe we'll just take one more. This one looks like it's right up my alley. When using the site speed report in Google Analytics, how can we analyze the potential amount of sales lost due to the site being X seconds slow? Well, we really can't show you the potential amount of sales. We can't model what might happen. But using that custom report that has the revenue from your website in it, along with some of the other performance metrics, you'll be able to see if there's a relationship between something that has poor performance and the amount of revenue that it generates. So while it can't show you the loss, you can use that as a baseline for optimization.
So Google did, I'll just make a quick note, Google actually did some tests on the search, on our search pages, where we actually made the search slower, right? And we tracked the impact of that.
Yeah.
So you could actually do the same thing. This is kind of a weird request to go to your developer and say, hey,
slow the site down.
Let's run an A/B test and make part of the experience slower. Right? So you could quantify this if you wanted to.
Yep. Yeah. So I think that's actually all we have time for. Like we said, ping either of us through Google+. The Google Analytics, we have a page as well, and we'll try to bang out some of these after this. We'll go grab a coffee
and we'll post the responses on the moderator.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Great.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody.